Hi and welcome to this video in the QPSMR Companion Up and Running series. And in this video we're going to be looking at Zzz entries. Zzz entries are special entries that go into a questionnaire to collect system information or other bits of data that are not part of your survey typically. Now Zzz entries have to be used with care. You have to make sure that you use them with the right type of entry type. And you can have as few or as many of these as you want to. Some of the Zzz entries can only be used once, others can be used as many times as you wish. Now we're not going to go through every Zzz entry in here to understand exactly what they do. This video is about giving you an introduction to the sorts of things you can do, showing you the help, and just giving you some general guidance on when you might use them. They're certainly very appropriate, I think, for any data entry exercise, whether that's paper, CAPI, or indeed CATI. For CATI, they have particular use because they collect things like the times and dates of any appointments that are set when perhaps an interviewer makes contact with somebody and says they'd rather be called back on a particular date, a particular time. But they also have use as well for knowing who's keyed in a questionnaire. So even from a paper questionnaire, you can identify who's done the keying in. Or, for example, on a CAPI survey, you can actually collect the geolocation so that you know exactly where the interview took place. So there's many good reasons for using Zzz entries, although on paper surveys you could have no Zzz entries. All right, let's have a look at a few. This is a questionnaire that we used in our CATI videos. And I'm just going to take you through some of the things here, but not all the things, just to give you a feel for the sorts of things that you can collect. Now, this data that you're collecting with Zzz entries, what they will do is they'll just be added to the data file like other bits of data within your survey. So just as you're collecting information to what people answer to question 1, question 2, question 3 of your survey, etc., this data will be put in the data file so that you can automatically collect it and have it available. Now this can be quite important to supervisors, certainly when they're looking after teams doing data entry or running a CATI team doing telephone interviewing, because it lets you do analysis. For example, you could see an average length of an interview, you could analyse that data and build your own analyses, perhaps how different types of people who are going through your survey, you could analyse how long they're taking, and indeed how long each person doing data entry is taking. All sorts of analysis becomes available by using these Zzz entries that do more than just having sort of, if you like, an audit trail of what's happened, actually give you meaningful analytics of productivity, how difficult a project is actually turning out to be, etc. So let's look at a few you can put in. Most of the skeleton questionnaires that you can download have Zzz entries in there so that you can collect this information. You can of course delete any of these if you want to. So let's have a look at a few. Let's not look at the ones at the top. Let's sort of start down here. So we've got ZZZUNS. So that collects the username of the person working on this project at the time. So if I were to key some data in now, that would be collected with the data, my login name, so that it would be stored with the data and I could be identified as the person who had actually entered data for this survey. The next field down is the date, so we could pick up the date of this work actually taking place, likewise with the time, and we can even identify which computer the work was done on so that we can identify perhaps there was a problem with the computer and perhaps work back to find any problems that might have cropped up. Sample status tells us the status of a sample if we've got a sample file. So for this you can see that a contact was successful or unsuccessful. We've got the total input time in seconds. So this is the time it's taken from beginning to end to enter a particular record. So if that's stored as 120, for example, that means it took 2 minutes to enter this data. You can store the number of keystrokes and the number of character keystrokes that were input as well, so text. You can you can collect the number of questions with an answer. So if somebody perhaps has routed through the questionnaire and skipped a huge section, you might find that somebody who's entering that data in 2 minutes, it might be because they've got a large number of questionnaires that are only answering perhaps 10 questions rather than people who are taking 5 or 6 minutes to enter 50 questions, for example. We can also track things like any entries that cause an abort. So if a person leaves an interview, you can know why they left. You can look at the last question that was input. You can even put the study name in with a data file. Now the next block of entries are mainly to do with CATI, or totally to do with CATI. So the number of calls that have been made to a number is accumulated here. It's taken 4 calls to get through to somebody. That information is stored, including the number already made today. And here you get details of every callback. Now this is special to CATI, and you'll see the block of 4 Zzz entries, the username, the date, the time, and the result of the call being stored here. So it goes 9876 right down to 0. And what this is storing is the outcome for the first attempt here. And then this is callback 1. Then we go to UN2, D2, TM2, and SR2, which is callback 2, and so on. So all the information is stored within the data to know all the callback times. And it's indeed how, if you like, QPS internally knows who to call back and at what time by looking at these files. But it also gives you the information on how many callbacks were needed. Appointment times and details of appointments and the times that are acceptable either side of that appointment can be recorded here with messages, so that if a CATI interviewer picks up an appointment and to continue an interview from the previous day, for example, the first person conducting the interview can leave a message for the second one to say the client had a problem hearing me, perhaps at some questions you might want to re-ask them, or whatever the message that seems appropriate. Down here we've got some more username details, dates and times, and then we come to the body of the survey here now. This is stuff from the sample survey, from the sample file, and then more data. But this one's quite a good one, ZZSEC01. You can have ZZSEC01, ZZSEC02. So this particular ZZSEC times how many seconds it is since the beginning of the interview. Well, this is the beginning of the interview, so it'll be very quick. But then I could, for example, put a ZZSEC02 in here, perhaps, and I would know how long it took from that ZZSEC to this ZZSEC. So this is really useful when you want to time how long perhaps sections of a questionnaire are taking. So if a respondent perhaps can go through 5 different sections, you might want to know how long it's taken to go through each section, so that you can have some diagnostics and analytics from your data that you can produce. So really useful information that you can get here that's stored with the data. And then finally at the end here, we can store things such as the outcome. So ZZZN stores the status at the end, and there's the end of the interview now, or end of the survey now. Now you might want to find out more about these. I've only gone through this fairly quickly. The help gives you a greater guidance on these ZZZ entries. So if we go to ZZZ questions and pick described and ZZZ questions, and if I scroll down here, you can see I get the details of all of the ZZZ functions. So some of the ones that we saw just now, and these are the ones that can appear as often as you want to, so you can keep collecting the date and time as many times as you want to through the interview, as long as you number them sequentially as 01, 02, 03. Here, the ones that can only appear once, so they're outcomes perhaps of the survey, the last question asked and things like that, total number of key depressions, and there's an end one here as well. So they're all summarised here, and we'd recommend that you have a look at these as you're working with QPS, whether that be for paper questionnaires, for CAPI or CATI. And you can see here's some that apply only to CATI, a special list. So I hope this video was helpful to you. We'd advise you to have a good look at this and understand it, because it's something that once you set up, you can set up a template so that you probably use that same template on every project, or certainly most projects, and just use that as your default skeleton QDF, if you like, for every project that you run, perhaps of every type. You can download skeleton questionnaires for different purposes, which we think are probably good standards to work to. You might want to delete some of those things or add some more checks in there, but at least it gives you a good starting point. But there's nothing like looking through this when you get your QPS license, or when you're starting to use QPS for different purposes, to understand more. Well, I hope that was useful. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos in the QPSMR Companion Up and Running series.